The play is set in 1889, and it's about a family-owned and run theater troupe. It's two brothers and a sister, and they've inherited a theater company from their parents, and they're touring around the country performing relatively outmoded or outdated melodramas, and they find themselves in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, on the eve of the great Johnstown flood. And it's about their adventures and misadventures in the aftermath of the flood. There's a romance between the ingenue in the theater company, whose name is Fanny, and the son of a wealthy industrialist. And then there are plays within the play, so we see the sorts of melodramas that the family performs. In the Allegheny Mountains up above Johnstown, there was a man-made lake called Lake Conemaugh, and it had been constructed by the wealthy industrialists of the day. There was an earthen dam that they had built to create this lake for their hunting and fishing club. It's called the South Fork Hunting and Fishing Club. And in the spring, there'd been torrential, lots of rain, torrential rain all spring, and then there was right before Memorial Day, there had been 2 or 3 days of steady rain, and the lake had gotten steadily higher and higher and higher. And on a Friday, the dam actually burst and picked up all this debris as it came, and then just hit Johnstown, the city of Johnstown, which didn't have much warning. They did have warning, but nobody really believed it was going to happen, so there was no evacuation or anything. And it basically obliterated the entire city. I knew I wanted to write about it, but you can't really just write a play about the Johnstown flood. I suppose, you could, but you have to have people doing things. And then I read David McCullough's account of it, which is called The Johnstown Flood, which is great. It's a real page-turner. And in the middle of that account, there's just a brief description about Augustin Daly's theater troupe, which was performing in Johnstown the night before the flood, and they were performing a play called Night Off, and then they were trapped on a train car the day of the flood. And there was just a description of how, while everyone was sort of running around panicking in the midst of this disaster, the theater company stayed incredibly calm. And he talks about how, as the floodwaters are rising, the women in the theater company pinned up their skirts to prepare themselves to have to run, basically, if the flood came. And there was something about that image of the women pinning up their skirts that I found really fascinating, and just made me start to think about the ways in which artists respond to disaster. And then I've thought about that for, I guess now about 15 years, trying to figure out how to write about it. And then the catalyst for my finally sitting down and starting the play was Hurricane Katrina. It's a true collaboration, and that Dollhouse is a great example. He came to me and said, I'd like to do a modern day version of Dollhouse, and I thought, somewhere in the back of my head, I've always wanted to do that too, even though I never thought to sit down and do it. And so I went and wrote it, and even though he had specific ideas of what he wanted to have happen, I didn't share those ideas. Sometimes we butt heads on things, but he always respected what it was I wanted to do as a writer, and realizes it beautifully, and doesn't just realize the play. I think he doesn't just realize a play faithfully, which is a really hard thing to do. He somehow manages to realize it faithfully, and then also bring his own vision and his own ideas and take on things to a text, so that it is so much better than for me as a playwright, so much better than even what I imagined could happen. And to find a director like that, who you're not going, oh, you're doing that weird thing, you're like, oh, you're doing some great thing I hadn't thought of before, is just really special. And I really treasure my working relationship with him and with the Goodman, absolutely.